I'm not getting a kick out of repeating this, but at the end of the day, there is only one conclusion. If this was not filmed with the aid of field lights or reflectors, NASA was either filming this on much brighter terrain than the moon's surface, or were shooting it outside in broad daylight where the blue sky would have offered natural field lighting. During my preparations for this experiment, YouTube user AstroBrant2 released this video in response to my earlier MoonFaker dealing with this subject. Totally skipping past his childish personal attacks, verbal masturbation, strawman insults, and cheap shots, AstroBrant2 makes a lot of claims in this video, most of which can be easily proven to be nothing more than overblown hype and a misunderstanding of some of the most basic principles. He starts by alleging that I make some, what he calls, irrelevant ad hoc arguments about albedo. Ad hoc? What is that, the word of the day?
Spurious arguments about albedo, like Jarrah White makes, are completely moot. Look at the relative brightness of the sunlit surface to the brightness of the astronaut. You can see it with your own eyes. The surface is much brighter and completely surrounds him, so it is quite adequate to light him up that much.
Relatively brighter? I think not. They look about the same to me. And we have just proven that a surface with an albedo of 7% is not adequate enough to light up the astronaut, even when lit. Look again at my photo. We can see that the asphalt inside the box is well lit up, yet it fails to illuminate the shadowed side of the LEM and just barely lights up the Lego figure. Again, this picture is being generous as it was taken using f4, which makes the asphalt appear much brighter than it actually is. And you can clearly see that it still doesn't offer the same degree of illumination seen in the Buzz Aldrin photograph. To narrow the aperture so that the asphalt appears correctly exposed would subsequently mean darker shadows in photographs. Here is another example. This one comes from Ian Goddard. The photo on the left is Charlie Duke during an Apollo 16 moonwalk. The center photo is a toy astronaut on white paper. The right photo is the same toy astronaut on black paper. Ian Goddard took these photos using a single office lamp. He took them to try and prove that the moon missions were real. In reality, these pictures prove just the opposite. Unbeknownst to Ian Goddard, white paper has an albedo of 87%. Black paper has an albedo of only 4%, about half the amount of light that the moon reflects. As you can see, much like the lunar surface, the black paper and the white paper are very well lit up, and yet only the brighter white paper is illuminating the front of Goddard's toy astronaut. The astronaut on black paper is quite dark. Even totally lit up, the moon's reflectivity would have pretty much the same effect as the black paper.
The moon is 240,000 miles away, and we need filters to look at it through a telescope. So albedo arguments here are utterly irrelevant.
You want to know why we need these filters on telescopes? Because telescopes themselves are light amplifiers. In other words, any light that shines into the telescope, no matter how dim, is automatically amplified and thus brightened. Meaning through telescope, the moon will appear much brighter than it appears with the naked eye. This light amplification works just fine when you want to look at far-off objects like stars, but it makes viewing closer objects like the moon difficult. For the same reason, planetary observations also require filters. Even though they are much further away than the moon, and appear like stars to the naked eye, the planets are in fact quite closer to us than the stars, and most of them reflect much more light than the moon does. My god, An elementary school student with an astronomy club membership could tell you that, and yet Astrobrand dismisses conspiracy theorists as conceited, unqualified, and ignorant?
It would be as if your neighbor's kids are practicing with their electric guitars and the noise is bothering you. Then they make the argument that you shouldn't be able to hear it because their amps are only set to 70 decibels, and according to their estimates, the noise is all in your mind.
This is by far the most utterly ridiculous analogy I have ever heard. 70 decibels is nearly half the noise level produced by jet engines. So that is quite undeniably loud. The Moon has an albedo of 7%, which is quite low as far as reflectors go. And no, that is not according to my estimates. It's according to the most basic laws of physics. As we learned from his hero, Michael Collins, earlier, we humans are accustomed to watching the Moon and thinking of it, when it's full at least, as being very bright. In scientific terms, however, it is a dullard. Its albedo is 7%, which means that it reflects only 7% of the sunlight that strikes its surface. To get an idea of just how dim the Moon really is, we need to wear sunglasses in the snow during the day so as to prevent us from getting snow blindness, a temporary blindness caused by the brightness of the snow. Snow has an albedo of 90%. Asphalt, like the Moon, has an albedo of only 7%, and we don't go blind from looking at it. As stated previously, the reason why telescopes need filters to see the Moon is to compensate for their typical light amplification. If our eyes amplified light the way telescopes do, we would most definitely need to wear sunglasses whilst looking at the road to avoid getting snow blindness. Or would that be asphalt blindness?
If there was a second light source being used, the ground shadow would not be so black, and objects in the field would cast shadows on it.
Why wouldn't NASA just black out the ground shadows prior to releasing the photograph? Oh, what's that I hear you ask? Well then why didn't they black out Aldrin too? Maybe they left him bright for PR reasons.
There are many photos from Earth orbit where items not directly lit by the Sun or the Earth can easily be seen.
And just how is this a valid comparison to the Buzz Aldrin picture? First and foremost, the Earth has an albedo of 35%. That is considerably brighter than the Moon is. Second, the Apollo astronauts brought no additional lighting with them. But the shuttle astronauts did. Look at the helmet. You can clearly see that one addition the shuttle EVA suit has over the Apollo EVA suit are headlamps mounted on either side of the visor. These will provide additional lighting and illumination in shadow. And the shuttle and space station themselves have exterior lights. Here is a picture of astronaut Jeffrey Williams installing one. It's very unfortunate that Astrobrand never bothered to confirm this easily checked fact before making this film. This video by Astrobrand is by far one of the absolute weakest pro-NASA videos that I've ever seen. He boldly and smugly claims to be able to demolish precious moon hoax evidence and dismisses everything people say as ad hoc arguments, when at the end of the day, virtually everything he said in this video can be shot down in less time than the 5 seconds it took him to research his baseless arguments. The fact remains, as shown by the Blackbox experiment, a surface as bright as the Moon's is not enough to make an object as bright as Buzz Aldrin's seen here. If this experiment isn't accurate enough, I don't know what is. I'll be back.